Well, what we're hearing in terms of comments are what we refer to in English as boilerplate comments. We're not hearing anything that is particularly informative. I would say that we could reach sort of two or three conclusions. The first, unfortunately, is that Trump has once again decided not to decide anything when it comes to Ukraine. He listened to Zelensky. Obviously, he was told by his handlers that he should. He did. And they seem to have had an amicable meeting during which Zelensky wants to license the production of Patriot missiles in Ukraine, which will never happen. But by the time they did that, Ukraine won't exist anymore, in my estimation. And Trump indulged all of that nonsense and sort of waved goodbye. He's not going to stop the Congress from wasting money and time on Ukraine. So he's just not going to decide anything. It's disappointing, but I think this is something the Russians have become accustomed to. When you turn to Netanyahu showed up and I think privately said what he's always said. Now, today in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article about a 2-week plan that is being developed by Admiral Cooper that would result in another massive missile and bombing campaign that would theoretically have different results. And we continue to hear rumors about the use of ground forces, particularly against Karg Island and potentially Chabahar on the south coast of Iran. So I think whatever disagreements they may have had, I don't think there's any change in the larger direction strategically. And I have this sinking feeling that we are going to be attacking very shortly in a big way.
Well, some of these attacks, though, it appears that the escalation control is not quite there. You've seen the attacks on Iraq. I mean, this can have a lot of unforeseen consequences. The involvement of Yemen now in the war as well is deeply problematic. But, especially the folks, well, there's a lot of countries involved here. But which is it that concerns you the most now? I thought that the Iraq one, I think, is underestimated how bad this can go. But again, I'm not the expert here.
Well, I think we can conclude that a couple of things are underway, one of which is this is a regional war now. This is no longer limited to Israel and Iran and the United States. It is spilled over into, as you point out, Iraq. The Popular Mobilization Forces there, the PMF, are very loyal to the Iranians that stood by them through the Civil War and virtually from the beginning of our intervention and occupation. They have their eyes on Kuwait, frankly. I think Kuwait will cease to exist when this war ends. It'll become part of Iraq. I also think that this war is spreading even to places that we're not paying attention to. There was a refinery in Egypt that was badly damaged by an unmanned system. We're not quite sure where it came from. That could have come from Iraq or any number of places. Could have come from the Houthis. Al-Ansara is now in control of the access to the Red Sea. Iran controls access to the Persian Gulf. This basically is a clear and unambiguous message that the United States Navy no longer controls either of those, and for that matter, is no longer the dominant force that it claimed to be. I think the second piece, and this is the most important part, and this is what I think troubles Trump more than anything else. The loss of control over the flow of oil, the destruction of the global energy complex, those things are important. But to Donald Trump personally and to his inner circle, what's at stake right now is the survival of American military, political, and economic hegemony. That's what it's all about. You'll recall all these silly remarks about the rules-based liberal international order. Well, that thing was concocted in the aftermath of Bretton Woods and the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, the instrumentalities that were supposed to be helpful and good for people in the world, and people bought that for a while, and they finally realized, as Charles de Gaulle predicted, that everything that was being developed was really a Trojan horse for American hegemonic power. Well, that's true. And what has happened over the last 30 years, as the Russians have noted and others, is that this hegemonic power expanded. And it's reached a point of intolerability. In other words, people just won't tolerate it anymore. And the acid test for this military hegemony has been Iran. And the United States Armed Forces thus far have lost. And so for all intents and purposes, the world has concluded that the world they lived in of American military, political, and economic hegemony is over. So what is Trump really doing? Trump at this point is really fighting a rearguard action. He's trying to save whatever he can of this hegemony. The reason he went back to war after signing the MOU is that he finally realized, look, the MOU is unambiguous surrender of U.S. military hegemony. I can't afford that. I can't allow it to happen. Now you have all sorts of people saying, well, if this is allowed to stand, if we cannot defeat Iran, then others will challenge us. And years ahead, we will be targets. Iran will strike us, and all this kind of crap. The possibility that most of the world will get on with itself, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere without us, doesn't seem to occur to anybody. We are now continuing to weaponize our economy, our financial system, sanctions upon sanctions directed at China, sanctions upon sanctions directed at Iran or directed at Russia, anybody that we don't like who challenges us. It's a dead end, Glenn. So I think we are rapidly approaching a turning point. Now, whether it's a turning point or we're just reaching entropy, I don't know. But if you look at the Russians right now, contrary to what people are saying in the West, they are advancing. And the Russian military is stronger today than at any time since the 1980s. More and more forces are being mobilized, trained, and equipped. And the Russian forces are now effectively blockading Odessa and Mykolaiv ports, shutting that off, turning what remains of Ukraine into a landlocked area. And Kiev is justifiably concerned that these so-called fortress cities are going to fall shortly. And that effectively opens the path to Dnipro, Kharkov, and Kiev. So Zelensky is worried. His government is decomposing, firing people left and right, people resigning, leaving. And at the same time, we've actually privately said to the Russians we'd like to talk, and apparently Minister Lavrov has said no thanks because he sees no evidence that we're really interested in bringing an end to the war. Then you turn to Israel. Israel is very happy that we abandoned the June Memorandum of Understanding. They simply want to keep the war going as long as possible because theirs is a war to the finish. They're in an existential war in their judgment, and they are. They're correct right now. They've turned it into an existential war for Israel. Either they can exterminate and annihilate their enemies all over the region or not. They have complete control of us for the moment, and so they're confident that that can still be achieved. I'm not so sure it can, but that's what they think. And as long as we are obedient and do what they tell us to do, I guess you could say they're going to continue. So we're in for another massive air and missile strike scenario, another offensive. And the White House remains what I would call an Israeli or Jewish lobby policymaking center. And so that's why I say Trump listened, and I think Trump is going to obey. At the same time, we're still in a fight with the Chinese. Now, the potential for war there has receded. Everyone, months ago announced that we didn't have enough missiles and enough capability to attack China, and if we did, we'd lose it. For some reason, nobody bothered to say the same was true for Iran. This is a catastrophic outcome for Trump. And the other thing that Trump, I don't think, is aware, maybe he is, but we're now beginning to see the emergence of a new axis. We talk about these axes all the time. Well, there's only one axis in the West and the Middle East. That's the Israeli-American axis. But when you look east, you have a growing axis that I would say consists of Russia, China, Iran, and I would add Turkey. Because even though the Turks have not yet engaged, they are on the very edge of doing so. And the population there is overwhelmingly in support of striking back against this Israeli-American axis in the Middle East. I think Erdogan has waited as long as he possibly can and will continue to wait, but he wants to be in on the end. It's sort of like the Battle of Waterloo, which was largely a German affair with a few British troops, contrary to popular belief. Prussians, Hanoverians, and Germans from everywhere. And of course, the British. And then suddenly at the end, imagine the Austrians and the Russians and others showing up. Well, I think that will be Turkey at the end of this thing. Because Iran had to do two things. The first was survive. It's done that. It's demonstrated it cannot be destroyed. And it's going to continue to attack because the second goal for Iran, having survived, and they weren't sure that they would. They spent 20, 30 years preparing, but they were never completely sure. Now they know they're going to survive, is to drive the American military presence completely out of the region. And that's going to happen because we can't protect our own bases, let alone any of our partners. So that's going to be achieved. And at that point, this new axis that I just described is going to dominate. It's going to dominate the Middle East. It's going to dominate Eastern Europe, perhaps Western Europe, because people in Western Europe are looking at this and saying, well, why should we sign up for the United States? It's no longer the leading economic power. It no longer has the same political influence. Financially, it's brought us to ruin. We're part of this Western scam, recirculate all the dollars back through New York City, fund our massive debt so that we can continue to live well. Europeans are saying, what are we doing this for? And then finally, there's the military dimension. Europeans are beginning to question their governments because they're unsure about this Russian threat. And they should be unsure about it because it's not real, as we know. But I guess the possibility that you could end up in a nuclear confrontation with China, Pakistan, and Russia, let alone a confrontation that would also include Turkey and Iran, these things don't seem to really enter into discussion in the White House. And I think that's because right now, everything that is being done in the White House, everything that's being done on the Hill, is seen through the lens of the Israel lobby and the fight for Jewish supremacy in the Middle East, as well as in the United States and the West.